Hey man,
What's up,
how are
man?
you?
I'm good. How are you?
How's the week been for you?
Crazy. I'm dead.
I know, right? But we did catching up for Buka Pasa, so that's always fun, right?
Yeah, that's a
Uh,
good one.
what's today's topic? I think it's a bit interesting. And you and I think we both haven't
Uniques.
focused on that ever.
Never.
I mean, we've done some smaller, probably engagements back home in Pakistan with some kind of cricket and some kind of engagement, but more towards integration rather than focus towards a bit more, which is what we're going to talk about today, right? So let's start off with what's the topic for the day?
Future of sports marketing in Asia. I honestly speaking, I'm not at all an expert. I will be like a newbie talking,
Yeah,
just asking questions. That's what it is. So we
absolutely,
have
man.
Julian with us, and instead of me introducing Julian, I think let's ask Julian to come in. So let's just start.
Hmm?
Cool. Alrighty. So here is Mr. Julian.
Hey man,
Hi
welcome.
guys,
Julian.
how's it going?
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good.
Not
In
too
fact,
How's
that
bad.
your
picture you've
rocking
got up
chair?
there was when I had slightly darker hair, I think.
Yeah, you did. That was the only one I
Yeah,
could find on LinkedIn, so I didn't want to disturb you for it.
you're right. It was actually only taken last year, so which tells you one thing: it was completely dyed. It wasn't
Yeah, I
real.
think a lot of people actually
It's
got
still
gray hair.
my
I got
hair,
gray
but
hair during COVID, by the way.
what's that?
I got gray hair because of the COVID. Trust me, in 1 year, I
Yeah,
actually
man.
aged so much that I have no idea. Thanks to shaving it, you can't see it. Otherwise, there's a lot of gray
Yeah,
hair here.
I tell you, the stress. It's all about stress, my friend. Whenever you stress,
That's
those
true.
little grey
Absolutely.
hairs come out.
Yeah, man.
So thanks for having
So
me on, guys.
thank you. Absolutely. I think it's a pleasure having you today. So one thing that we do is we don't introduce the people that come on board. We let them introduce themselves. So let us know who you are, what you do, and how do you know me?
Sure. So, Julian Jackson, obviously, it says it there on the screen. I've been in Asia for around about 30 years now, all
Oh,
of it in sports. So I've worked with broadcasters, ESPN, Star Sports, 10 Sports in the subcontinent, as well as I was working for an agency for a long time, Total Sports Asia, buying, selling, making content. Obviously worked in a number of different areas in terms of some branded content, and that's how I know you guys. I ran the
Yeah.
sort of branded content side of the Zenith business, where I met
yeah.
Maz and Minam. So that's great to see you guys again. So I've in the last 30 years, it's pretty much all content. And then it's about a year and a half ago, I started my business with a business partner of mine, James White, with a company called ResultX Asia. And what we do is we advise companies how to enter the sports market, how to enter the Asian market, strategies of bringing a product into Asia or into the sports market. And we're also working with a number of sports tech companies, and that to help traditional sporting companies and organizations, that's clubs, federations, leagues, pretty much anyone in the sports ecosystem, and broadcasting to how they can make more money as their traditional revenues are going down. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
things that maybe we'll talk about today is we're seeing huge amounts of reductions of revenue in terms of media rights revenues going down,
Yep.
sponsorship revenues going down, obviously attendance because no one's turning up to the events because they're not allowed to. So all of these different sporting organizations have got to find new ways to make money.
Yeah.
Making money is generally a great way to do it through technology and engagement with your fans, direct to fan rather than business to business, more business to consumer.
Absolutely. So let's just start off with it, right? So a lot of people, as I mentioned, right, might not know what sports marketing is, right? So just a brief about that in terms of how do you define what sports marketing is for anyone who is in the marketing field or not? And if I was just simply put it there for them, what would it be?
That's a really good question because there's a number of different areas, sports marketing. So if you're a sport or if you're a federation or a club or a league, you need to make money. You need to market yourself. Now, sports marketing is not so much seen as, like social media marketing, which is, and the thing is, if you're a sports brand and you're a club, for example, you're a football club or a cricket team from the IPL or the Pakistani Premier League, then you don't necessarily need to market yourself, but what you do need to do is make money. And sports marketing is involved with the making of revenue for a sporting organization. So that's through media rights, that's through sponsorship, as I mentioned before, that's through ticketing, excuse me, endorsements, and then, as maybe we'll talk about a little bit later, is fan engagement, because there's obviously a fair bit of money to be made out of the fan engagement space. But really, it's how you monetize your fan base, because it's very different to products. It's very different to products. Products, they have to market themselves. They have to get out there. They have to advertise. You very rarely see Manchester United, for example, advertising. Why would they? They have the interest. People are interested in them by the very fact of what they do, not necessarily. Whereas if you're Nike, for example, you have to tell everyone, hey, look at our new products. Look at our new range of things that we do and what have you. So it's a very different situation. It's not marketing as you would talk about it, and the world that you live in, guys. It's more a case of it's that revenue generation.
Got it. So in terms of when you talk about endorsements, right? So I get the major part of it, which is how a sports club or a sports organization would want to make revenue, and that's where you come in and you help them connect the buyer to the seller. Simply put, there, right? A service being provided, and you get paid for it. But does it also include endorsements for individual players? Does sports marketing also include that, or that's a separate realm altogether?
Yeah, it's all part of the mix. If you talk about a sports marketing agency, right?
Yeah.
That will be someone like, probably the most famous in the world is a company called IMG, which I think is now called Endeavor. They had in the subcontinent, they had what's it called? A joint venture with Reliance. It was IMG Reliance, I think. And they've just split up actually in the subcontinent. But IMG, what IMG do, they organize events, they represent athletes, they sell television rights, they sell sponsorship rights, they create content, and pretty much everything, the whole ecosystem they do. And so that's what that's the whole. That's how an agency works in that world.
Yeah. Awesome. And you mentioned you've been here for more than 30 years, right? So, and you've seen Malaysia grow and probably seen the Asian market itself, right? Now, we spoke about huge, right? So we did speak briefly before the session started in terms of what the current state is and post-COVID. But what does the future look like? So, do you want to talk about a bit in terms of currently Asia and then outside Asia? What do you see is going to happen or is happening?
Whilst I've been based here and a lot of my work has been here, I also do sort of worldwide. It's not just Asia that I work in, but if we look at the size of the world sports market, we're talking about it's about $500 billion, or at least it was in 2019. It was
500 billion.
500 billion. It's just not a small amount. I mean, I've seen statistics. If you add in all of the different elements, it's about 1.2 trillion.
Wow.
But look, I've seen a bunch of different. On this is because you guys had asked me a question before. What's the size of the sports market? So I did a bit of research, but that's 2019, right?
Yeah.
We reckon the estimates by a number of different organizations that measure these things are saying that if you look at how it's reduced during COVID, It's scary. Right? And it's almost like a third of that has gone away. And so the reduction in TV rights revenue, I think I saw I wrote this down. I saw it went down around about $50 billion because of COVID, because a lot of events didn't happen. Even when events did happen, like with Premier League and things like that, there's refunds to broadcasters. So the numbers are huge. So it's a massive market. But one of the things we've seen with COVID, though, and the change of COVID, it's wholesale change. I mean, seriously, we're looking at an industry I think turmoil is the wrong word. I think industry that is in the middle of a huge, what's the word? I'm trying to say something.
Paradigm shift.
Transformation.
Yeah. Transformation. You've hit the nail on the head there, but I was trying to find that word and I couldn't find it in the back of my head. So I appreciate that. So yeah, it's a massive transformation because, as I said earlier on, we're seeing massive reductions in revenue, and so what? Like in every different industry, and I'm sure your industry as well, necessity is the mother of all invention.
Yeah.
So when you haven't got a choice, you have to do something different. You have to change. I mean, I think probably the biggest story in the last actually it's probably the biggest story in the last couple of years is the whole ESL, the Super League situation that happened in Europe. I'm sure, I presume you guys know a little bit about that. What happened was they tried to this sort of 15 clubs or 12 clubs were trying to form a Super League, a European Super League, where there was no relegation, no promotion. Now, look, we could argue for hours. I mean, I could for hours about that whole thing. I'm not going to. What I will say though is why that happened is because those big clubs, despite them being the biggest clubs in the world and with the biggest revenues, have lost so much money in the last year and a half. They have. I mean, and to be honest, it's their own fault. They've spent too much money. They as soon as they've got their $100 billion or $100 million from revenues, they spend it all on the players, which is daft. But it is what it is. So what they've done is they're all trying to outdo each other. But the reason they've done this is because they're hurting, and so they're trying to do something new, and they're trying to protect their revenues going forward. Now, luckily, it didn't work out, but what we're seeing during COVID is every organization that certainly I've been speaking to and reading about, and I read the sports press every day, the sports business press, and they talk about how, there's not a day goes by I don't see a new initiative by a sport, a club, a federation, or whatever. And, we're seeing things like watch parties. I'm sure you might have seen that in some cricket. And I know Disney Hotstar did a sort of watch party with the final of the last IPL. And I think they're doing that again with some football, and I think the IPL going forward. A lot of the clubs in the IPL are doing the similar sort of thing. They're doing watch parties, they're doing talk shows, user-generated talk shows on their own platform. Now, what you've seen previously is it was all on YouTube, right? It was all on Facebook Live, as we are on today. And the thing is, it's really difficult to monetize that. Facebook make a lot of money out of it. They use the data, they have the data, but the actual clubs themselves, they'll host this type of stuff, a talk show between like this, where we're all talking about a particular subject and what have you. And Facebook make out of this. What they can do now is do it on their own platform, and they can make money through tipping. I think tipping's we're going to see in the next 2 years. The rise of tipping. Now, I'm sure.
What's tipping?
Okay, so tipping is you've heard of Patreon. Have you heard of Patreon, which is if content creators, it's like a place like YouTube, but you get exclusive content and you're helping the creator create it. I guess a more infamous one would be OnlyFans. I'm sure you may have. Actually, no, two good boys like yourself, you've never heard of OnlyFans.
No, I have. Actually, in fact, my point was basically this tipping and Pioneer actually started off from porn. So porn was the industry who actually started off this thing, and now people have taken
100%. I mean, what you've seen it? I've seen it on on YouTube, and someone told me I think they do it on Facebook now. But basically, you have a chat show, a talk show, or there's a bunch of apps around the world. The one in Philippines called Kumu, which is like the #1 app in the Philippines, called Kumu, and they make millions of dollars every month above their costs. I mean, like seriously, a lot of millions of dollars based on their share of tipping. So people just tip if they like what they do. So, for example, you could do one of these seminars, webinars, and if people like it, they can tip. They can say, "Oh, I love what Julian's saying here. Here's $1, or here's a virtual beer, which not that I drink anymore, but a virtual popcorn or a virtual whatever, a Coke."
Got it.
And that would be, maybe they'd have to pay, 5 cents for that, or something like that.
Yeah.
So tipping is huge in China. If you've heard of Bigo Live.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, a number of different platforms similar to that. So tipping, I think we'll see sporting organizations, but also other organizations make money via that, because it's now a business model that personally in my generation, I can't even imagine it. But that Gen Z generation, it's normal. If you like something, it's normal to give someone a tip. Not for me. I'm probably too tight for that. But certainly we're seeing that the younger generation tipping is huge. I mean, like in China, for example, there's some influencers who are making more money on tips than they are through endorsements. I mean, it's serious money. Serious money.
Awesome.
Oh, that's good. I just have one question, Julian. If, for example, I'm asking very stupid questions today. That's my role today.
Please do, mate. You'll get stupid answers, trust me.
So if you think, if you are a marketer, right, sports marketing, and of course, I've seen you like 5 years back as well, pitching sports marketing to clients. Sometimes sports marketing is not, it doesn't come very naturally to a marketer. If you talk to them about TV ads, about digital ads, branding, blah, 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 all that stuff, it comes very naturally. They can understand. If, for example, in sports marketing has a lot of stuff. I remember your previous, like 5 years back. Right now, I'm sure you have more stuff in your pocket. Like, you can sponsor players, you can work with them, you can work with clubs, you can brand the venues. There's a huge. If, for example, I am a potential marketer and we have viewers, right? And I haven't done anything in sports marketing. At least I figured it out that this is one thing there. People have passion. I want to be a part of it. How should I get into it? What are the key questions I need to ask, and what you can just think of it as a pitch, right? If, for example, I am the new client, right? How you want to tell me what exactly it is? How should I get it?
To be perfectly honest, Mars, I would say the same principles apply as what you do every day. It's not a million miles away in terms, what's the ROI on this? The gone are the days where you just slap a logo on an event and say, well, hey, there you go, sports sponsorship. Those days are gone. I mean, look, of course there are sponsorships like that, but they're few and far between. Every different brand wants to know, what are the metrics? What's my ROI? How many people are going to see this? But the reason why you would get into sports marketing is very much it's tapping into that passion of sports fans. Sports fans are amongst the most passionate people in the world, or at least it's the most passionate subject in their lives. You can be passionate about fashion, you can be passionate about influencers or Instagram or whatever it is that your thing is, but the amount of passion shown by sports fans generally tops that out. That's my opinion. Because I've been in the middle of crowds where people have gone nuts, and I mean seriously crazy and nuts. In fact, probably just an anecdote. Probably the loudest and most passionate crowd I've ever seen in my life was in a badminton stadium. I've been to a badminton stadium. I've been to football stadiums.
Okay.
I've been to cricket stadiums, but because it was all enclosed, the noise was amplified. And the noise, it was actually in Indonesia, and it was nuts. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, when you're a brand,
Yeah.
you want to tap into that passion, and you
Yeah.
want the associative conditioning. And this is a word I learned about 10 years ago, maybe, a phrase. And what that means is if you are attached to something that people are passionate about, a lot of that feeling, a lot of that love will rub
Rubs
off
on
on you.
you.
It rubs off. And,
Yeah.
there are a bunch of stats out there about how when you do sponsor a particular, sport or club or player or whatever, that if I read it, it was something like 63% of people who follow a sport or follow a team or whatever will more likely buy from the brand that sponsors their passion. So that's obviously, that's a strong reason to why you'd want to do something like that, because you tap into that passion. And some great examples are, like Red Bull. Red Bull have done a great job in the sports marketing space.
Brilliant.
In terms of, they offer amazing content, in terms of sort of the export type stuff, like skateboarding, skiing, all these sort of jumping off satellites in space type thing. Remember that dude that jumped off, the highest free
They're
fall
literally
jump
out
or
of
something.
this world kind of shit, right?
Yeah, totally.
But
Go ahead. You can
no,
ask.
so I'm saying, but they found their own niche, right? And I think what I'm trying to understand is, I think that if it's not in the brand's DNA, for example, or they don't see as an opportunity for them to grow, it seems very hard to then pitch. Because at least my experience, so in Pakistan is different. In Malaysia, at least, what I've seen is, right, if you are, and I've not seen a lot of it where sports marketing becomes big. I know Coke does it a lot because they have an association with the Premier League brands,
That's
and they are
global one, yeah.
official global sponsors, so they have to do it here, right? But there have been very little opportunities for me as a media person where I've gone in and pitched a sporting event or a sports marketing opportunity, and the brand's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because one, they're scared of the huge investments behind it.
That's
And
true.
second, they don't understand the link between how my brand's going to look or be part of this. Even example like brands like Snickers, right, which is a chocolate brand, right? They do a lot of sports events globally, but Malaysia, we haven't seen that connect with football or in that case, right? So is that
That's a good
a
point.
real struggle, or is it just the way probably we are pitching right now, and it can be tweaked a bit in terms of?
I think the reason behind that is actually it's more of an Asian thing as opposed to just Malaysia specifically.
Yeah,
Now, the big brands, they, as you're drinking a Coke there, these guys, are some of the most sports marketing savvy companies around. But majority of local Asian companies, and they could be huge, but they're you see them as local area. It's, as you say, it's not in their DNA to get involved in sports, unless, of course, a lot of sports sponsorship comes from the passion of the CEO. If the CEO is a big fan, guess what? He may be, and then the marketing department will try and justify that sponsorship.
of course.
And there's a great story about DHL. I think it was DHL. They sponsored rugby and all the broadcast rugby on Star Sports a few years back. And it was all down to the fact that their CEO was a huge rugby fan. And all his mates were rugby fans. And so they were sponsoring it on that. I'm not sure it was DHL, whoever it was. But it comes down to what the CEO likes. But I think the big in the West, and I talk about Europe and America as that, the culture is much more ingrained in sponsoring sport and being involved in sport. I'm not saying it's any easier, but I'm just saying there's much more of a stronger culture. And really, sports marketing in Asia only really happened, I wouldn't say happened, but I would say really came into its own, it's got to be about 30 years ago, whereas maybe it's 50 years ago for the rest of the world, or at least the West. And so, and it's still developing, and it's still developing today. And obviously, a lot of the practices that were done in the West are now happening here. But the actual companies themselves, sponsoring companies, it's not part of their DNA. And so, what they need to, if they are looking at sport, and that's a question that Mars said, is what are the things they should look for? I think first is the audience of that sport, that club, whatever it is, the entity that you want to sponsor or event, are they the same as yours? Are they the same customers as your as the fans of that particular? That's number one. Because no use, sponsoring a golf event if it's all Gen Z that are buying your product. Waste of time.
No, that's a very important point.
So I would say that's the first one. But then it's work with someone that you have built a trust with, and it could be the media agency like yourselves, or it's a sports marketing agency, or someone that can bring you an array of opportunities. Because don't go out there yourself and try and work out, okay, I'm going to speak to the Malaysian Football League, or I'm going to speak to the Premier League, or I'm going to speak to the IPL, or I'm going to speak to the Pakistan Premier League, whatever it is, because you'll just hear one story. And I think what's really important for a marketer to do is really listen to an expert. I'm not saying me. I'm saying any sort of company out there that knows. I know you two guys
basically work with a consultant, right? Basically work with a consultant.
Because what they'll do, and make sure they're not necessarily affiliated to any one particular thing. Because you want to see, do I sponsor a TV program? Do I sponsor a club? Do I sponsor an individual? Do I sponsor a league? Do I sponsor an event? So you want to see what each of those different things can do. And a good, intermediary, and look, intermediaries get a lot of a bad rap, but at the end of the day, those intermediaries do that for a living, and they know, and they can advise you. You've got to be careful of sponsoring this because these are the consequences of all the different areas. But if you look at, say you've identified cricket as your thing, and that's the thing. Cricket's really expensive these days. Never used to be, but it's damn expensive now. And I think everyone knows. Obviously, some of our audience in Pakistan, it's the biggest sport in the region, but they also know that. So the sport themselves and the cricketers and clubs and the federations, they know that. So the prices are pretty damn. So that's where a little bit of guerrilla marketing is a good idea. So you don't necessarily have to be an official sponsor. You can associate yourself with, for example, you could associate yourself with a fantasy game, or you could associate yourself with a website that reports on cricket, or you could associate yourself with many different ways where you don't necessarily have to pay the huge bucks that you would be to be a Pakistan Cricket Board sponsor or a player sponsor. So that would be my two pieces of advice: is really find out, is the audience the same as yours? Once you've decided on a sport or whatever it is you want to do, is talk to someone that has a lot of contacts within the sport and can present you with different opportunities. And then look at what's going to give you the metrics. Because the metrics, as we all know these days, it's essential. That ROI and that, how many click-throughs, how many products did I sell, how many, anything, whatever your measurement is, that is essential. And there's a lot of sports that can't give you that. They will say, oh, we can do this, we can do that, you can tap into passion, you can get this, you can get that. And they say, well, okay, how many cans of Coke am I going to sell? Oh, don't know. So try and work with someone that, or at least a sport or an organization that can help you gather that information and get you that information. Because I think that's essential for any brand or any marketer these days.
That's a very good one. That's a very
in terms of the, like, for example, you said the ROI and also the results, right? Are there companies, and I'm assuming your company is one of them, because it's called Results, right? So you guys work on that model that I will, if I'm asking you to pay X amount, this is the X amount of Coke, for example, that I'll make you sell, and my ROI, and then calculation basis that. Do you promise that, or it's still a model that's not being like in that?
Julian, before you answer, I just want to add one more thing. This is from a marketer perspective. If, for example, on the other side of the equation, if I'm a club, I'm a team, right? Or a cricket team. Just giving an example, someone in Pakistan Super League cricket team. How do you work with them? Do you have an ROI with them as well? For example, they say, okay, listen, my problem is that I want to make more money. I come to you. How do you work with them? Is it like a profit sharing? What is ROI?
So generally for an agency or something like that, you'll get maybe a commission, or you might even get a small retainer if you're doing a lot of work for them. But generally, you would want to. Like for example, I'll give you a really good example. Just the other day, I was sent a proposal from one of the biggest sporting football clubs in Portugal, and they needed a new shirt sponsor, and they had this huge deck, and throughout this deck, it all talked about ROI. It talked about, okay, you will get this many viewers, because the average attendance is, I think their average attendance was 35,000 to 40,000 fans every week, of course, prior to COVID. This is how many people watch the games. This is how many people download the highlights and watch the highlights, and so they gave all of these facts and figures that can give you how many eyeballs you're going to get. All right. Now, obviously, that's not going to say how many. Say you're selling Snickers bars, how many Snickers bars you're going to, but at least it's going to give you some indication of the number of eyes that will see your brand of it, and where they will see it, and how they will see it, and they talk about ROI, an awful lot in their proposal. So they're the people you want to work with. You want to work with people that understand it, because there's a huge amount of people in the sports business that still live in the dark ages who don't just say, hey, stick your logo on my event or my shirt or my whatever it is. So I think it's really important to work with sports or organizations that speak your language, because the good thing these days, a lot of the people that work in the sports businesses are ex media agency guys, are ex people who've worked at brands, and they understand what a brand or a media agency needs before they'll make any decision towards sports at all.
Got it.
So look, in answer to your question, Mars, is what would how does it normally work? Is they will throw a number at you, in terms of, at least the sporting organization will throw a number at you and say, this is how much we believe our
the value of
our event is worth, and this is the media value you would have got, if you bought that media value yourself. And of course, as we all know, it's you have to reduce it by a factor of about 20 or something like that to get the real numbers. But it's the key is really work with people and sports and organizations that understand your language, because you're wasting your time if you don't.
Got it.
That's a good point. Just last one. Does it also work in a way that, for example, if I'm assuming a board, right? And can you also give me, work as a consultant with me to rightly justify my price, or give me what exactly it is worth for?
Sorry, evaluation, basically. So can I bring you on board as a club to evaluate my club?
Yeah, you can. Actually, something that is quite unknown, or not unknown, or not very well known in the sport world, is most prices are plucked up from the air. Seriously. I worked in the media rights business for a long time, buying and selling media rights, and there was no rhyme or reason why it went for 10 million or it went for 5 million. I'll give you a very good example. This is my favorite story in the sports business. So I used to work with a company that was selling the media rights to the WWE wrestling, which is huge. Very, very popular in Pakistan as well. But for the subcontinent, the rights, this is quite a few years ago, and I hope I'm not giving away too much here, because it's obviously a little bit confidential. But we were talking to one broadcaster, the current incumbent, and we wanted about 3 times what they were paying at the moment. Right? They were paying a certain amount, but let's use small numbers just to, so I'm not giving anything away. They were paying $3. Okay. We wanted $11. Okay, so it was a huge increase, but the reason we wanted that, because it's hugely popular in the subcontinent. So it was a case of, okay, we went to the incumbent and said, look, okay, we want to renew with you guys. You've been a great partner. It's now $11. Okay. And they went, you've got to be kidding. Absolutely not a chance in hell are we going to pay $11. And what, actually, what I'm really talking about is billions of dollars. But so then we talked to a couple of their competitors who were interested. And basically, we ended up getting an offer for $18.
Wow.
Right. And then we went back to the original rights holder, or at least broadcaster, and said, it's now at 18. Are you in or out? And they offered us the equivalent of 18 and 1 cent. And
that's a lot for deal.
But then the next, during that day, it was probably the most exciting day I've ever had in my sports career. The bidding just went up and up and up and up like this, and it reached a much bigger figure than the 11 that we wanted in the first place. So, look, was there any rhyme or reason there? No. I mean, was it worth that? Actually, I think it was, because the next renewal after that doubled what the numbers were again, right? Yeah. But the whole point, what I'm trying to make is most of the prices that you see in sports, it's about competition. If there's competition,
it's demand and supply and audiences, right?
Demand and supply. In your world specifically, there's a lot of logic to why something is X amount of dollars to sponsor it to whatever. In the sports world, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of logic, but majority of the time, it's plucked out of the air. It's plucked out. When you enter Dave Beckham and say, okay, can you endorse my product? And he'll say, okay, it's a minimum of $1 million to get me out of bed.
Yeah.
Right. Where's the logic in that? It's because you want it that you're willing to pay $1 million.
Yeah.
Now, if it's too much, then you're
not
going
to
go. You go to a cheaper star. But I've seen similar footballers who are at similar levels. One was asking $500,000. One was asking $250,000 for an endorsement. No rhyme or reason why you would just get the same results from sponsoring either of those or endorsing one of these guys. But it was just their agent asked for more. The player one, the agent asked for a hell of a lot more than player two.
Yeah, it's just being greedy, probably.
But basically, my whole point is a lot of it is actually just plucked up from the air. No rhyme or reason to it.
That's what it is. Passion sports. So Julian, next what we'll do is that we will just go with a few questions. There's a lot of questions you must see on the side, but I'll just pick a few. In fact, because that's a good segue, because we wanted to discuss indoor games and esports and all that. So I think it's a good question here because of COVID, you see this. So Faraz is asking this question. He's a super fan of our show, so he asked a lot of questions. So he's saying, can we say indoor games will grow with lower execution costs? Indoor games can attract the audiences. Magic ball for you, Julian Jackson.
To be perfectly honest, I don't think it's going to make much difference. Outdoor and indoor sports have coexisted over the years, and it really comes down to how popular is the game itself, irrespective of where it's played. The lower it doesn't necessarily mean lower execution costs, because obviously some of these venues are very, very, very high to rent or to use, and yet you can only get a small amount of people. So, for example, in an indoor venue, generally, most indoor venues are between 5,000 to 20,000 maximum. I mean, often many of them are a lot smaller than that. Yeah. Whereas if you're an outdoor venue, you can get 50, 100,000 people turn up. So that lower execution cost, I don't think is too relevant personally. Yes, of course, they can attract the audiences, but at the end of the day, you've got to look at it's cricket, it's football, it's basketball, Olympic Games, and baseball, and NFL, NBA, all these sort of things. They're popular for a reason. They're all outdoor sports, not necessarily. But I don't think it's got anything to do with them being outdoor. It's just, I think it's tradition, it's marketing over the years, and many other things. So, will indoor sports grow any more than outdoor sports? I don't think so. I don't think there's any difference, personally.
Okay, so I'll just reword this. Instead of indoor games, I'll say e-games.
Ego.
Okay, then what would be your answer?
That's a very different story. I worked with an esports company, for a year or so, and I was selling esports rights. And one of the things with esports, and I'm sure you've heard it in your careers, guys. Every company is saying, right, I want to be in esports, but I don't know how.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll
Every
give
day.
you a really good example. I was working in the Philippines with Coca-Cola, and we were going to a meet. I was working for an esports company, and we went to see Coca-Cola. And generally, in my career, I've seen Coca over the years, and they're, they know what they're doing. They really know what they're doing. And I was shocked and surprised when I sat in this meeting. We sort of presented what we had to present, and they were all over us. Generally, Coca folding arms. Oh yeah, what have you got? Oh, you got the World Cup, have you? Ah, okay. Maybe we'll look at it, because everyone goes to Coke. Every single sport, anyone that needs money. Oh, wish we could talk to. They got a Coke or Pepsi or whatever. Yeah. So, but these guys, they were like, oh, can you do this? Can you do that? And they were really keen, and they needed some guidance from experts, because that's the key with esports in the brand space. Is you have to, and it's something that even though I've been in the sports business for 25 years at this point, I'd not really heard the word authentic being bandied about as much as I did in esports. Esports, you have to be authentic, and I didn't think it was important until I kept hearing it day in, day out from the esports guys, people who are passionate about esports. If you are not authentic, and this is the problem that Coke had originally, they'd sponsored some esports, but they weren't, by the esports community, they weren't seen as authentic. And what happened was they got a lot of stick, and it was, it had the opposite effect. Them sponsoring the event, I think it was in Korea or China, if I'm not mistaken, and they got a lot of bad publicity because of it, because they weren't seen as authentic. They were just seen as some fizzy
sponsor.
drink. Yeah, exactly. And they got a lot of bad feedback from the esports community. So what Coke worked out, and they're a smart bunch of guys. You don't work for Coke to be stupid, basically. But these guys, they worked out, okay, we have to be authentic next time. If we're going to do anything with esports, we have to be seen as part of the community, and we're adding value. So one thing that you will see, and I guess back to the question from Faraz about esports specifically, is yes, you will see a huge growth in it, because people want to, or at least brands want to be associated with esports, because it hits a demographic. And that demographic is the millennials, Gen Z, whatever you want to call them, who are the future money of the world economy. So you will see esports get bigger and bigger. You will see esports eventually in the Olympics. We already see it in the Asian Games. We already see it in the Southeast Asian Games. The Olympics have been sort of trying to say, no, it's not going to be the Olympics for any time soon. But just this week, they've started broadcasting esports on the Olympic channel. They have their own sort of OTT channel.
I remember the first time I actually had a conversation with you, you actually was presenting to a client. You said exactly the same thing. E-games will come in Olympics.
Yeah, it will. Because you've got to be where the audience is.
Absolutely.
There was a I think it was the CEO of Liverpool Football Club who said, I went to see Liverpool every week, went to the ground and watched them. My son did, and his son is going with him now. But his son is not as interested as my son was. And because he's playing Fortnite, he's playing League of Legends,
PUBG.
Mobile Legends, and PUBG. And so if we're not talking to that kid, we're going to lose him.
We're going to lose him.
And if they don't, so that's going to be very, very important. And that's why everyone wants a piece of esports. And the funny thing is, the actual fans of esports is not as big as you think. They're fans of gaming, but they're not necessarily fans of esports.
Yeah,
but esports will grow because the brands come in. We'll see it more on our TV screens,
bigger
on our
events,
internet screens. Exactly.
Bigger prizes.
So do you have any good example? Like, for example, okay, sports, when you think about, we think about Coke, we think about Red Bull, all that stuff. But esports or e-games, right? Do you have any good example of a brand who has done amazingly good job?
I tell you who did a really good job, and this was happened when I was at the company, was Mercedes-Benz.
Okay.
Mercedes-Benz gave a brand new Mercedes to a player that was player of the tournament, or I can't remember what he got it for, or maybe it was just the first prize or something like that. Oh no, actually, it wasn't the first prize. It was for the most kills in a day, or something fairly small. But the whole community talked about that way more than the $1 million that was, or the $5 million prize money. They were talking about giving the car away because they're young, and getting a Mercedes is a big deal.
Yeah.
So that was seen as very authentic. It was seen as adding value, and of course, Mercedes got that exposure to that younger audience. Maybe they're not going to be able to afford Mercedes today, but the fans will be
But they will in the
hopefully.
future. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but I think they've
It's
changed
the
the
aspiration
imagery.
you created, right? It's the
They also changed
aspiration
the
you created
imagery.
from day one.
Mercedes is
Yeah.
considered very like old school. Okay, cool. So that's a good one. I'll just ask this question. This is, I think, right into your alley. This basically question, and I'll reword it as well. What was the main why Facebook bought rights for La Liga streaming and highlights? And here I just add one more thing. Do you think that you worked in the broadcasters, right? And we spoke about this whole bidding wars going on. Do you think with Facebook coming in the bidding wars, it will kill the broadcasters more, traditional broadcasters?
So that's a great question. That's a super question. And actually, you always know when someone doesn't know really the answer when they say it's a great question. Actually, I have an idea about the answer to this question. But the reason that they're very tactical now, most of the rights holders, the federations and the leagues and everything, they were hoping Facebook would come in and compete against the broadcasters. They were hoping that Facebook, Amazon, Twitter,
YouTube.
Twitch, YouTube, the whole works. They were going to come in and with big checkbooks and that didn't happen. And actually, Facebook are not going to renew. If I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm right in when I say this. Facebook are not going to renew the rights to La Liga. It was a tactical move to test it out in India. Actually, the guy that runs Facebook Sports is a very good mate of mine. He used to run 10 Sports in the subcontinent, a guy called Peter Hutton. And I remember reading an interview with him where he was talking about they're going to do tactical moves, select sports and select markets, and it's not going to be one of this big worldwide going to buy all the big rights to, all of the broadcasters going to go to the wall because of it. So did that work for Facebook? The fact that they're not renewing it tells me maybe it didn't. Now, what's the reason they did it? I have to admit, that's the bit where I was saying I don't know the answer to that, why they did it.
But if, for example, if you remove Facebook, Julian, if, for example, I say the example of like Hotstar in India, right, for IPL, do you think the OTT players, perhaps like Netflix is testing it out, the Netflix Live thing as well, do you think that at least the OTT players will get into it? And they have big checkbooks as well.
100%. I mean, we've seen that this week. Was it this week? Yeah, I think it was this week when Disney announced that they're pulling all of their 18 channels out of Southeast Asia and Hong Kong.
Yeah. And
that includes Fox Sports, Star Sports, all of the different major channels after October are no longer going to exist because they're going to put all of their content on their own OTT platforms. And so we will see that much more. When Disney do it, that everyone's going to follow suit. They're pretty much the biggest media company these days. So, they own Fox. They bought them out a few years back. So really, I can't see broadcasters surviving their current form. Most broadcasters that I know of are organizing their own OTT platforms themselves. Most distributors like cable networks or satellite cable networks, like Astro, for example, they are going to be doing their own OTT plays, as it were. So, in fact, what actually was very interesting, I read about Astro, and they announced this week, I think, or at least they were talking at a conference, talking about how they were going to be a curator of OTT services. So just like the curator of channels, they want to be a curator of OTT services. So if you could buy Netflix for, I don't know, 30 ringgit, 40 ringgit, whatever it is these days. I don't pay, my wife does. So, whatever that cost is, you could buy for Amazon Prime another 30, 40 ringgit. If you wanted Disney Plus, that's another 30, 45 ringgit for whatever. But if you buy them through Astro, maybe you get all three of them for 70 ringgit or 100 ringgit or whatever.
Yeah.
So that actually I think has some value, and that's what
That's
we
a
like
very, very
to
good, because
promote.
because I think no one wants to pay like 40 ringgit for each and everything every day, like
Correct.
iQIYI, iFlex, VTV. How many OTT you have?
Julian, I've got a question for you before we move to the
ahead.
next one. What is the weirdest request that you've gotten from a sponsor?
Ooh.
It's okay if you don't want to disclose the name or at all, but what's the funniest thing that you've seen? Like, okay, you like, guys, I cannot do this shit.
I want a signed bat for my kid. I want a picture
That's easy.
of you.
That's easy.
Yeah,
That's a cute request, right?
Yeah, I remember once getting an internship for a sponsor's kid. The kid needed an intern. He wanted to get in the sports business, so I hooked him up with an internship. To be perfectly honest, guys, from the sponsorship side of things, I haven't dealt with too many crazy requests, and I'm racking my brain to think of any. Honestly, I haven't got any good. I wish I had some good ones for you, because it's a good question. It's a great question.
Okay, cool, man. So I think we'll just go to the last part of it. We just have 9 minutes left, so it won't take much of your time. It's already midnight.
No, but hey, any chance for me to yap on, I'm more than
I have one question. I think it's the one question which I wanted to ask personally. If, for example, you want to, if you love sports, like for example, I love sports, right? And one sports I really love is those three bats behind in your background. So if, for example, you love sports and you love marketing, that's me, right? That's sports marketing for me, right? That's the best career path for you. So how do you end up in it? What are the tips you can give it to someone? Whether you because I think there are a few people who are really interested in sports, but at the same time they love marketing as well, and I think that's the best combination to you. But what are the traits you need? What are the stuff you need to brush up on? How do you see sports? How do you analyze sports? What do you should do?
That's a great question, and I think I've been asked this quite a few times over the years. Is how do I get in the sports industry? I mean, I really these are my passions, and I'm lucky. I mean, I see myself as a very, very lucky guy, because I always wanted to work in TV when I was a kid, and I'm a sports nut just like you guys. And so I figured to myself, I really want to be in the sports business. And how I did it, I was just for me personally, I was just super lucky. Right place, right time. I was living in Hong Kong. And I just applied to every sporting company I could possibly find, and I managed to get a job with a golfing yacht club, which then led me to get a job in organising the Hong Kong Cricket Sixes, which is it was, I guess it's the precursor to T20 cricket.
Yeah, great. It started on that power hitting, like weird ways of actually.
Yeah, it was a great event. I mean, we had people like we had Wasim Akram. Did we have Afridi? No, we didn't have Shahid Afridi. We had Javed Miandad. Javed Miandad is an absolute legend. I absolutely love Javed Miandad. But anyway, so I organised that. So I was very lucky that at that time, getting a job in sports in Hong Kong, it was in the early days, 93, 94, it wasn't that hard. Now, if you're trying to get into sports in UK, where I'm originally from, that would have been difficult, because everyone wants to get into sports. Every young boy who has a brain, wants to be in marketing, they all want to be in sports. And actually in Asia, for the longest time, most parents would never even think that sports was a career. Now, obviously,
still, I don't think so.
Yes, exactly. So I'll never forget when I met a girlfriend's parents, and they said, "Oh, you're in sports. Can you get me a cheap pair of trainers?" All they could think of was sporting apparel. Anyway, so my advice to anyone that wants to ever get into sports, it's persistence. Don't be let don't sort of be discouraged by rejections, because you will get them. Most jobs in the sports business are not advertised. In fact, I very rarely see sports jobs advertised because it's filled by friends of friends, people. In fact, the dude that runs the media rights for the Premier League football, probably one of the greatest jobs in sport, because how easy is it to sell the Premier League football? You go to it's like, hey, broadcasters, come to me, rather than you having to go to the broadcasters. But that guy that runs it, great dude, a friend of mine, he was an intern who got the job through his sister, who was a secretary at the Premier League. She was just a secretary. She got him a job as an intern, and now he runs the whole thing. So a lot of it is luck. But I would, that sort of thing doesn't happen every day. So my advice is get on LinkedIn and find anyone you can find. Befriend them, write them a little note. Hey, I'm trying to get into the sports industry. I know it's difficult. Please, I'd love to hear. You could give me some advice. Maybe not expecting a job, but could you give me some advice? There's a lot of people in sport, like myself, and I get these emails all the time. Hey, could you just give me some advice on how to get sporting? And I'll always take them, because I was that guy one day previously, and it's like pay it forward. And I strongly believe in paying it forward. So, there's a lot of assholes as well. Excuse my language. There's a lot of guys who will just ignore you. And probably 50% will ignore you.
That's fine.
I would like to think 50% will come back to you and say, hey, maybe I haven't got time, or maybe I'll give you 5 minutes of my time, or what are you looking for? Maybe I'll introduce you to someone. And so what happens is people will come to me and other sports people, and they will ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. It's really, really that simple. So it's just contact as many people, be polite, be respectful, and don't expect anything, because most of the times they might not have a job, but they may know someone who is, and so they'll put you in touch with someone else, and that's how you build up your network. And so what'll happen is, as with LinkedIn, if you're friends or you're connected to lots of people in the sports business, then when you get this same person tries to connect with another person, he'll see that he's connected to me and think he'll accept it. So it's that it begets your own network. And what happens is, if you keep writing lots of emails, don't phone. Most people don't want to phone from someone because people are busy. Just drop them a quick note, polite, respectful, but be persistent. If they don't reply back to you in a couple of weeks or a week, do it again. Maybe two or three times you might have to do it, or you just have to try new people. But you will find somewhere that will help you. And I've had people come to see me, and I've given them advice. I say, look, I haven't got a job for you. Sorry, but I know a guy that may be able to help you. And they've got jobs that way. But the whole thing that some people will tell you is like work for free. No, don't do that. Seriously. Particularly in the subcontinent where there's a huge amount of people and only a small amount of jobs. People will say, "Oh, you got to work for free to prove your worth." And personally, I've got a real problem with that. If you're providing value to somebody else, you need to be compensated for that. You've got to put food in your mouth. So I'm not I would, unless it's the opportunity of a lifetime and there's a guaranteed job at the end. I really don't think that's just exploitation.
Yeah,
personally.
and also I think it's to know your sport, right? To be on top of exactly what's happening, and probably that's what you said in the beginning, right? You read that paper every day, and you read the news as much as you can, right? To know exactly what's happening. I think that's something that's going to really, really help.
Having a small amount of knowledge about a broad range of subjects goes a very long way.
Yeah, makes sense. You don't have to be a domain expert everywhere.
Correct. Yeah.
I agree.
That's good. Great.
Perfect.
So we are almost there. So if you have any, Julian, I'm doing a little bit of marketing of yours. I hope it's okay for you. So if you have any issues, if you have any questions, you can write to Julian. Julian is kind enough to share his email ID. If you want to, I think Julian is fine, right? If you, if someone wants to have a preliminary kind of a discussion, if they're thinking about something about sports, wanted to be part of it. So Julian works globally. So wherever you are, you can have a word with Julian on that.
I mean, if people want to get a job in sports and they're looking to, and they need a contact, come and add me on LinkedIn. say hello and be polite, and I'll be polite back.
That's very kind, man. That's very kind. Last 10 seconds. Do you want to say anything before we close the show? Anything that's on your mind? Anything at all? That'd be awesome.
Not at all. To be honest, guys, really appreciate you guys thinking of me. What you guys are doing on your Media Boys podcasts and webinars are brilliant. I actually did my own sports one with a friend of mine. But guys,
I love it actually. I actually sometimes tune in. I sometimes tune in, by the way. Yes, I do.
Glad you did. I'm glad you know. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. But you guys have you're doing a great job, and you're good dudes, and I'm glad we stay in touch.
Yes, we should, and we should catch up soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Julian.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure having you today. Take care, man.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.